Hi, everybody, and welcome back to our Virtual Connect series. In this session, we're talking about the boring but important work of our governing documents that run our association, our bylaws. And to do that with us today, we have a number of people who have been intimately involved in that. Our panel will include, let me make sure I can advance this here. Adam Harding, our 2020 president and chair of the Bylaws Task Force. Carol Lawrence, an attorney and legal counsel to us for this and many other matters, and Zachary Taylor, the 2019 president and chair of the nominating committee this year. We're going to give you an overview and context of the changes, talk about some of the legal requirements that precipitated it. We'll introduce the concept of local advisory councils, which is a policy that's recently been adopted by the board. We'll talk about how the board composition has changed and what stays the same, the timeline you can expect to see as this goes forward, and then what next steps are available. This will also be a time, of course, for your interaction and engagement. We ask that you use the Q&A function on your Zoom screen to feed questions into us or comments to have that discussion. We think it'll take, about 25 to 30 minutes to give you the overview, and then we'll reserve the final half of the hour for your conversation. So with those precursors out of the way, I'll ask Adam if you'd like to get started.
Thanks, Mike. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us today on your lunch hour. Bylaws, fun stuff. I've had the privilege of chairing the task force to review these bad boys over the past several months. And so hopefully you've noticed this year that we've enacted a handful of changes to the organization. We have set new values, a new vision, a new mission, and with that also we wanted to review our bylaws to reflect where we are going as an association. And so that was kind of the main purpose of really digging in and doing a deep dive review. Our bylaws were last updated in October of 2016, and those edits followed an organization restructure that merged the 5 corporations, the 4 local sections in 1 state into a single statewide body and governance model. And during that process, there were a handful of things that still weren't figured out with the bylaws. And so with our kind of new focus and vision moving forward, we wanted to take a deep dive into this and make sure that we are setting the stage for success moving forward. Additionally, the AI National has updated their bylaws in 2019, and our bylaws need to be aligned with what AI National is stating as well. And so we looked at that. And additionally, there's also some Colorado nonprofit corporation laws that have been updated since 2016. And so we wanted to make sure that we are in compliance with those as well. So our new values, who we are people that connect, we are people that advocate, we are people that celebrate one another and advance our profession, and we are people that catalyze. And that's who we are as AIA. That's where we want to focus our attention on. Our mission moving forward is to activate Colorado's architecture community to advance positive change. This is what we stand for. And our vision is to create a movement of change agents to broaden the impact of architecture. And hopefully you've seen that. Hopefully you joined the conference last week, which was great. But we've set 3 imperatives that we could start to really advocate for as a profession. So current conditions. The board of directors put together a bylaws task force that included myself and Rachel Johnson, who is our incoming president for 2021, Zach Taylor, who is our past president, and then our 4 section directors. So Rob Pyatt, Sarah Broughton, Shiva Willoughby, and Ignacio Correa Ortiz. And so we went through line by line of the bylaws and really looked at it and took a deep dive and to align with the national governing documents and to align with the Colorado Nonprofit Corporation Acts. And then we also wanted to simplify and clarify where possible and adapt the bylaws to the changes that are happening in our world and in our work, and to most importantly, to align with our new mission and vision and values, and how those govern and how those reflect in the governance rules, and support our volunteering opportunities in our committees and our task force and our board seats. And last but not least, we wanted to avoid the shortcomings of the past and provide multiple leadership pathways that respect the many member contributions and identities, whether it be by professional interests, career stage, or location. And so some of the language in there has been revised to reflect all of these things. So with that said, I'm going to pass it off to Kara, who is going to explain some of the Colorado Nonprofit Corporation Acts. So, thank you.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. Unlike what everyone else seems to think here, I think bylaws can be absolutely fascinating, but I guess that's just me being a bit odd and being an attorney. These bylaws are very interesting. I think you all know that the structure change of the AIA Colorado entity through the mergers of all the state sections a few years back. And one of the conditions of remaining an affiliate with AIA National is to follow their bylaws. So this was, of course, undertaken to make sure that the state's bylaws match AIA International's. And I came in after the committee did their review and looked to make sure that there was Colorado specific provisions, because despite the fact that AIA National, they want us to mimic your bylaws, there's very specific state statutes for each one. So I just ensured that everything was in line with the Colorado Nonprofit Corporations Act. And specifically, Colorado has some really great rules that have been in place for a while, but I'm not sure until at least this year, people paid too much attention to them. And so what I specifically added are the rules relating to having virtual meetings, be it member meetings, board of directors meetings, virtual voting, which is has been permitted in Colorado for a few years now, but it wasn't in your bylaws. So I want to make sure the bylaws are kind of clear about that process, and to make sure everything else aligned with what the statute said. The next slide. What you'll be voting on are the proposed bylaws that have been recommended for the members to adopt. You're going to be getting an email from AIA Colorado. You can see the email address there. The process is in line with the Colorado statute regarding members voting by, the statute calls it ballot, by written ballot, although this has been certainly designated to mean voting using email platforms and online platforms. So you're going to see email with your credentials to log on to the online platform. You're going to be given the ability to either vote yes to approve the bylaws or no to reject them. It will all be done through this electronic platform. You'll be given good information when you sign on to this, including, the quorum requirements to have the vote count. The current bylaws right now, the quorum requirements is 10% of the eligible voting members. And we're going to need, I believe, 2/3 of those eligible voting members, the quorum, to approve the bylaws. And so this information will all be provided. You'll have a certain amount of time to vote electronically, and some other basic rules, such as only, one person would vote, and some clear things like that. It will be happening at the same time as our federal election. So please, don't forget to do either of them. And there won't be any kind of motions or amendments or debates. Will be a straight up or down vote. Again, almost everything, all the changes in the bylaws, or almost all of them, are what I'm going to call non-discretionary changes. So either they've been handed down by AIA National or they're in accordance with the statute. But to the extent you have any questions about the changes or any comments, we'll be taking those at this meeting. So that's important. And as you see up there, and as will again be included on the email announcements that go out, the voting will stay open until November 10th. And with that, I think I will turn it over to the next speaker.
Thanks, Cara. So I am going to kind of go back over the new local advisory council structure that the board rolled out. We first presented this at our July town hall. So if you were a member participant in that, it might be a little bit of a repeat here, but we wanted to get the word out again. So last spring and early summer, we put together a task force to really look at how the section leadership was structured, how we can strengthen the leadership of the pipeline of leadership up to the state board and really engage with that. And so this is the model that we've come up with. We have the section director who's like we've had in the past, but underneath them, working very closely with them, we're going to have what we're calling a local advisory council. And that'll be made up with, ideally 3 individuals, but maybe more, maybe less, depending on the size of the section. But we have the professional development co-chair, the member involvement co-chair, and the community engagement co-chair. And they kind of each have their fingers and realms, as you see, based on this floor chart. So to first talk about the section director, really not a lot is changing on the section director. There's still the main link between members and the board back to the members. We are a member-led organization, and we want to make sure we have everybody's voice heard. And through the section director is your main conduit for talking and bringing up issues to the board. But to give them a little bit of assistance in their local sections so that we can do things more at a grassroots level like what we're used to, we've come up with the local advisory council. So the first of the 3 on the advisory council is the professional development co-chair. And this person is really helps the section director with prioritizing and planning events that are to be accessible, unique, inclusive, and mission driven. And we're going to continue to utilize some of the programs we've put forward in the last couple of years, such as our local connects, whether those be a hard hat tour or a firm tour or an educational program, however that may be. And also our kind of end of year member milestones where we recognize newly licensed, new members, new fellows, and really just get together to have a good time and celebrate the year and achievements. And then the next section will be the member involvement co-chair. And this person is really to help with getting people involved in the process, to welcome new members, to be the point person in the section for questions about how to get more involved with other things. This person's going to help out on the statewide nominating committee where we meet to talk about who would be good for different positions and encourage people to apply. We'll talk more about the nominating committee here in a little bit. But really this person is just to be the wayfinder and put people in the right places where their passions are. And then third, we have the community engagement co-chair. And this is really about local government advocacy. So we have the Government Affairs Committee, which is a statewide committee that talks about statewide issues. And they meet year round and they look at the bills and stuff that come on the Hill in Denver. But really, this person wants to focus on the individual municipalities and local areas. And just so that we're, as a statewide organization, we need to be aware of what's going on in the smaller communities and to make sure that we can advocate and have local voices with that. And so this person is really going to work alongside that. They're also going to see what we may be able to do as an organization for service projects or public programming and really get public involvement and with those kind of things. And then lastly, we've had a lot of questions, so we're going to touch on regional ambassadors a little bit. We've had people come to us and say, I own a firm, I've been practicing 20 plus years, I've been involved in the past, I just don't know how to get involved now. So regional ambassadors is really where we want your involvement here. And this is really to help the section director, but also the member involvement co-chair. All of our sections are fairly geographic diverse, some more than others. West is huge, right? A lot of times the leadership and most of the members in West are in either the Vail or the Roaring Fork Valley. So if you're that architect in Durango that really knows what's going on in the southwest portion of the state and you want to be involved, this is how you can get involved as a regional ambassador to have that chain with your member involvement co-chair and your section directors to bring things up the pipeline of, what should AIA Colorado be involved in your area, and what things are happening. Likewise, in Denver, Denver's fairly small land-wise as a section, but you've got all the different municipalities. People in downtown Denver may need reminding what's going on in Arvada and what the pulse is there. And so this is really meant for all levels and all sections to be a way to help funnel that to the leadership so that we can keep everything moving. So how does this affect the bylaws? So we, as a board, we did adopt the policy for the new section structure, but we really need the bylaws vote to be able to enact that. And it also talks about a little bit of a change up for some of the director positions. And so I'll just touch on, first I'll talk about what hasn't changed. So we still have a president position. It's a 3-year term. You start with president-elect. Your second year, you move to president. Those are both officer positions. Your 3rd year, where I'm at, you're the immediate past president and you become a director instead of an officer. Nothing's changing there. We still have a treasurer and a secretary, both officers, both 2-year terms. Those are staggered so that we don't have we have an alternating roll off and roll on for the board. Nothing changing there. What we are proposing with the section directors, we're keeping the section directors. We still have one for each local section. What we're proposing is we're going to move those directors and really all the directors, unless a couple others, but really we want to move all the directors to 2-year terms, and we want to get the roll on and roll off time staggered so that we don't have, over half the board changing every year, and we have a little bit of continuity moving forward year to year, a little bit of that corporate memory that just helps every organization succeed. So that the big change with the local sections is they're going from a 1-year to a 2-year term. With the at-large directors, currently we have one at-large director. They're appointed by the board, and they're usually an outside individual to help us focus on a certain point with practice or with our industry. This last year, we've had Mark from the University of Colorado, and he's been a great resource. And the board decided that, we really need to have a close tie. We need to maintain close ties with our educational pipeline for students. And so we are adding a second director, at-large director position with the language such that if a faculty member or administrator of a Colorado accredited professional architectural degree granting institution, is what it actually says, if they are in another position on our board already, then we've got that connection and we don't need a separate spot for them. But if we don't have a person already on the board, then they will be an at-large person on the board so that we keep that, that relationship moving year to year. And then we're adding a position so that if we fill the first at-large place with somebody from the university, then we can still be nimble and pull in another outside source to help us with key issues year to year. And so that director position is 1 year, but we can renew them year to year because they are appointed by the board. And then finally, we have the associate director, keeping the associate director. The change there is also moving that person to a 2-year term. Again, to keep with the continuity and not have to retrain every year, everybody, and just keep that momentum moving forward. Also, any member in good standing, whether you're an associate member, a fellow, a regular architect member, as long as you're in good standing, which means you're current on your dues, you can apply and serve in just about any position. And our open call for nominees is not changing either. We're going to roll that out here shortly. Anybody that's interested and is a member in good standing can apply for those positions. So we'll kind of get into the timeline here, which is next, I believe, right? So we've put out the bylaws. We've put out the notice for the special meeting. We're here today on the 21st with the town hall discussion. As Kara said, we're going to email out that election ballot on the 5th. So look for that. Voting will stay open until the 10th. So, you know, ideally you're going to see it and you're going to vote and you're not going to forget about it, but we are going to have a 5-day window there to make sure we get as many members to vote as possible. Then on the 11th, the open call for nominees is going to be published in the e-news. That'll be in the regular Wednesday e-news that goes out. So make sure you're looking at those. But we're going to have, not only we're going to have the open positions, which I'll just run through real quick. We've got president-elect that we're going to be looking for the next president moving forward. This year, the treasurer is going to be an open position. With the section directors to start the stagger, we've actually had the Denver director, Ignacio, and the South director, Shiva. They've actually been on the board for the last 2 years. So they're going to roll off, and the Denver section director and the South section director positions are going to be open. With West, Sarah, and North, Rob, they're going to maintain their status for 1 more year to kind of to help us start that stagger. Then we'll of course have the at-large director positions that are open, but those are appointed, and then the associate director will be an open position. But also with the call for nominations, we're going to put out the 3 co-chairs for the local advisory councils for each geographic section. So that's another 12 positions that we're going to have in the call for nominations that'll be available for people to apply for. And so we want all those applications, people that think you're interested. If you're not interested, your goal is to get 5 other people that you think might be interested and bug them to apply so that we get lots of applications. So if you don't apply, get 5 others. That's the rule. And the deadline for that is the 25th of November. Then the nominating committee will get together, go through all the nominations, make sure everybody are members in good standing, make sure they're a good fit for the positions. And then we'll have, you know, ideally a slate of candidates that we will put forth in our report to the board. Then the board will meet to talk about that. And if a vote is needed, we'll put that out to the members for a vote. So with that, I think I'll turn it back over to Adam.
Thanks, Zach. So that's a kind of high-level overview of a handful of the changes that are in the bylaws, the specific ones that we feel were important to take note of. If you want more information on our AI website, there is a landing page where you could find our overview of the bylaw changes, as well as all of the documents to review for yourself. And so that would include the existing bylaws from 2016, the information on conforming to the AI national bylaws, and our revised bylaws with all the notes, and then the cleaned up version that we are trying to approve this year. So we hopefully will have all of your support moving forward with this and set us up for success moving forward in the future. So with that, I will hand it over to Mike.
Thanks, Adam. I'm going to stop screen share now. We'll bring the panel back up. Thanks everybody for that high level and detailed overview. It was really helpful, and it's a reflection in a very modest sense of the hours and hours and hours. I think literally hundreds of hours that have gone into this from the task force, the board, staff. You know, this thing that I'm leaving on the screen momentarily, the executive summary, you know, Nick Aremus did that. Amy Blagriff did a ton of research with other associations, and you know, we were in touch with national throughout. So we stopped counting the track changes when it got close to 1,000. So we're not going to bore you with all those mundane details, but we just wanted to give this opportunity today for you to explore a little bit deeper and find some of the reasons why we're doing this. So now's the fun part of the program, when you get to participate and ask us any questions or have a dialogue about any particular item. And we're of course looking forward to a successful vote. We would love to have support, but we understand that it's your right to choose either way, because you are the organization. We are your professional peers and colleagues that represent you on your behalf as far as board directors go. But we've learned from some past experience, not only of good practices, but some missteps that might have happened when we've tried this in the past, and are coming back to you again with, I think, a more informed and deliberate and responsive model to how the association needs to operate going forward, not just for our mission and vision, but for all, as Adam said, all the ways that members contribute and practice as architects in the state of Colorado. So with that, we'll open it up for questions, comments, concerns, violent disagreements, laudatory praise, you name it, we'll take it. And again, you can use the Q&A function, which appears at the bottom of your Zoom bar for that. And one more housekeeping note, if you do recruit one of 5 people to serve in those positions, they want to know what the bylaws is about, or you have colleagues in your firm or that you know that couldn't make it today, we're going to have this session on our YouTube page, our YouTube channel for AI Colorado. So it'll be a record of the conversation that goes forward and that overview as well. So be sure to watch for that, and it will be on that landing page that Adam mentioned. Okay, we've got a question from Carl Hole, 2018 president. Good to hear from him again. The structure associated with the local sections seems great. Are those positions elected? Zach, you want to take that one?
Sure. So thanks, Carl. So yes, they will go out with the call for nominations, which is open to all members. So if you're a member in the section that you want to apply for one of those positions, great. If we have multiple people apply, then we probably will have a vote. If we have only one person apply, then we won't have a vote and no contest. But but essentially, yes, we're looking for that. And this is kind of our first trial run. This is why we've done this as by policy as the board. It's going to be a new thing for 2021. You know, if it doesn't work, we're gonna tweak it. We're gonna modify it. If some sections need more than 3 people, you know, we might be able to expand that by policy and say, hey, we can do more than just the 3. Or if the smaller sections say, hey, we can only get so many people involved that are passionate about it, and so we need, you know, we can only fill 2 of those 3, then I think we'll figure out how to make that work as well. The whole goal is to make this work locally.
Thanks, Zach. And any other panelists can chime in if you've got anything to add. We've got our next question from Beth Rosen. Hi, Beth. It's good to hear from you again. Saw you at the conference. She asked, she says, the West section was interested in having the West Gala and awards again. What is being done for these 2 items for the West? And I will start by answering that question with the local advisory councils. There's a specific position for that, which could be charged with bringing those members together and connecting them. So whether that be a public event, that might be your local community engagement director, or if it's a members only event, that might be your professional development co-chair. But in either case, that group of 3 co-chairs working with the section director can come up with any number of good program ideas and how to implement them, including celebration of design within your section. Would anybody else like to expound upon that one?
No, I think you nailed it on the head. I think the idea was to give the local sections the ability to organize and communicate and provide meaningful programs and functions for the members in their community. And so that was the goal and the intent of providing this sort of structure. So.
Thanks, Adam. We got a question here from Michael Riggs from down south. Can you confirm that section directors are assigned to the section which they have chosen to associate with, i.e. not elected and then assigned to a section, or from another geographic section elected to a position representing another geographic location? So a section director has to be a member in good standing of that section that they come from. is my paraphrasing of that question. And I think I know the answer to this, but I'll let one of you guys take it.
Yeah, so just to clarify, yes, you have to be a member of a section, which is voluntary, but you have to be a member of a section to run for section director of that section. It's not, we're not going to have somebody from North be the Denver director or something crazy like that. So you will be a member of the section in which you run for that position.
There might be some instances where the address on record, if you're close to a border, so for example, you could have, there's two addresses you can use for membership, and it's your choice which you use. So let's say you have a work address, your firm address. Well, maybe your work address is your home address right now, but your firm address could be in one section and your home address could be in another section. But we would just ask that your address of record that you use for membership be the one that the nominating committee vets in terms of appointing or electing that section director. So if you are on the border between Denver and North, for example, between one address and the other, we would use, if you're running for North director and you have a North address that uses your official address of record, that would qualify you to be a North director. So kind of a roundabout way of answering that, but that's just the only wrinkle I can think of in addressing Mike's question, is if someone lives and works in two different sections. Okay, so let's go to another section question. This is from Jason Kersley. Will section directors have access to a budget for local events and programs, or will it be handled at the state level? This is a good question, and one we have not totally answered yet because it's still new, and I'll ask Adam and Zach to weigh in on this too, but a couple things come to mind here. The first is there has been a policy where everything went through the state level, including sponsorship. So if you wanted to have a local connect or a member milestone event and had a local sponsor, maybe there's a product manufacturer in your section that wanted to do an event, that had to still go through the state level. And we basically walked back from that to say, if you can find a sponsor for your program, of any program, go ahead and secure that sponsor. It's a big enough pool of interested participants that we're not going to make you ask for permission at the state level for that. The other thing that's in the bylaws, and I forget chapter and verse where it is, but the board is compelled in a sense to establish a budget for local section activities. It's a discretionary fund. And so that is something that goes into our budget development process year to year. And then we're also looking at the iteration of how the region level of the organization changes. Right now, we are part of the Western Mountain region. It's a governance function where it elects people to the National Strategic Council. It also charges dues to all the 6 states that are part of that Western Mountain region. National's proposing that regional governance piece go away, and it's possible those dues may no longer be required to be collected to support that section structure, but we could take some of that revenue and redeploy it for local section activities and have no net change in the bottom line of what members see on their dues. Anyway, that's enough for me. Adam, Zach, or Gary, you want to address that?
I'll chime in. So when we last approved a bylaws change in 2016 was when we repositioned and we went from 5 fiduciary responsible businesses to 1. The key word there is fiduciary responsibility. So right now the state board is the fiduciary body for the organization. And so when things about money come up, it has to flow through there. You know, when money changes hands, it has to come through the state level. I think what Mike was talking about with local sponsorships, you know, if we get a sponsor in kind, if you get a venue sponsor and they provide the venue, if they provide refreshments and they just bring those, then that's easy. That's you know, they sponsor those things. But if they want to write a check the check needs to be made out to AIA Colorado. And then AIA Colorado in turn turns it back and puts it towards that program or however that works. But just to clarify, when money changes hands, it has to go through the fiduciary body, which is the state board and organization.
Good clarification. Okay, thanks, Jason, for the question. Stuart Coppage asks, what do you see as the biggest challenges for AI Colorado in general? And following on with that, the successful implementation of the new structure. Who wants that one?
I'll tackle the second part. I think the second part to successfully implement this is member involvement. I'm going to say it again. If you don't sign up for something when the open call goes out, you got to get 5 other people to sign up, because this whole thing only works with member volunteers. Adam's a member volunteer. I'm a member volunteer. You know, we do this because we're passionate about the organization, and we need more members to be passionate about the organization and step up. And you know, I'm not asking everybody to apply for president, though, you know, that'd be awesome. But we have other ways to get involved, and we have now more nuanced ways. We have, you know, knowledge communities that have really taken off in the last couple of years. So if you're passionate about healthcare, and that's where you want to be involved, we have a healthcare knowledge community. So get involved with that. And if you're a new member and you don't know what to get involved with, that's why we now have the co-chair for the member outreach to be able to go to that person, and they can point you and figure out what your passions are and point you in those places. So I think the key to successfully implement this is to get people involved and get the word out.
Yeah, and you know, the biggest challenges are, you know, having that continuity. The change in term limit for the board members is, I think, something important. Usually, when you join a new board, it takes about half the year to kind of just get up to speed of what's going on, and so having the term limits be stretched out to 2 years allows that continuity and that board to gain momentum. This year, I think we've started on a great path of making great change for the organization, and started to be forward thinking about who we want to be and where we want to go. And so keeping up that momentum is going to be key. And also that culture of belonging, that imperative that we set, is something that I think is something that we all have to strive for, especially now with a pandemic going on and not being able to meet in person, but we're still able to connect. And so how do we start to bring that back down to the local level with this local section structure and those positions, and trying to allow people in their different locations to be nimble and to provide opportunities for everyone to connect at whatever level they want to. And so I hope that by these revisions to the bylaws and what we've been talking about allows us to really be forward thinking and set a direction and have that momentum moving forward. And so that's why it's important that we update these bylaws and we move forward with the momentum that we've started this year.
And I'll be really interested to hear what Kara says, because I know you work with a lot of other associations on challenges when you're in a transition like this, and really making a wholesale revision to your governing documents. But before we get to that, while you're thinking of that answer, I think you know, Adam and Zach both made some great points. It was really strange when I came here to see the terms of board members were 1 year. I mean, you could have 100% turnover with the exception of the presidential progression on the board, which is, you know, that's a lot. And so that was one thing that was noticed right away, that let's at least get a little more continuity here. The fact that the board is smaller has advantages, but it also runs some challenges in terms of a variety of perspectives. So the only way to have the board choose to bring someone else on, have any discretion about who they bring to the table, was through that single at-large spot. And so that really limits how you can take a small board and bring more voices to the table. So I think the addition of another one is great, especially because we have such strong interest and involvement with the School of Architecture right now. So we don't want to lose that, but we also don't want to handicap our ability to bring another voice to the table if it's appropriate. Biggest challenges for AI Colorado in general are things that aren't unique to us. It's basically this whole COVID environment that we're living in right now. It's, Stuart, as you know, you've been on a number of task forces nationally, and we're treasurer. So as you can imagine, the entire business model for associations has changed as a result of this, where it relied very heavily on face-to-face programming and engagement that had sponsorship, that had registration fees. So that whole income proposition has radically changed, but we have to continue doing those programs in this new environment and find a way to pay for it. So that what you saw last week was our best attempt at trying to navigate that new business model. So we're gonna sort through those as best we can and continue to keep people connected. I think the staff and the board and the volunteers have done a great job of that. As mentioned previously, we've got over 100 members serving in 19 different committees. So there's still people doing work as a volunteer. So how they interact with each other is going to change, and how that translates to the membership at large is a big challenge going forward. Carol, what about what you've seen? You deal with a lot of associations and nonprofits, and they have these, milestones in their history where either the law changes or their business practices change or their aspirations change. And they need to get their governing documents in line. And sometimes I appreciate that you said this is exciting to me.
It is.
How do you make sure the members are excited and see their aspirations for what their association stands for in those changes?
I mean, I think working with, primarily associations and other nonprofit organizations, a lot of times when there's times for bylaw changes is often because the operations of the organization has changed. So it's really having the legal documents catch up with practices. And I kind of think that's what's happening here. The mission, the vision of the organization is still there. It's still trying to be responsive to its members. It's trying to deal with these unusual times we're under. The only way the laws recently changed has been very helpful regarding, using electronic signatures and electronic voting and making sure it's very clear that everyone can have meetings by, virtual, by telephone or video conferencing. So I think a lot of it is just catching up with the good practice that the organization wants to implement for its members. And then I think it's a matter of just educating the members about why this is being done. And once you kind of get over those two challenges, it tends to just, be very easy to move forward. It really is making people understand why the changes are needed and to ensure you're being, following your practice, your operational practices, but making sure you're in compliance with the law at the same time.
Yeah. Thanks, Kara. Last thing I'll say about the second part of Stuart's question is my biggest fear is that nobody shows up. We put these out there and ask for a vote, and then it either fails because we've misread the mood of the organization and the culture of its members somehow, or people just are too busy or distracted and don't care, and so we're stuck with some very old bylaws language. And I think it's fair to say, even though I wasn't here to experience it, but I've heard from a number of members that there was a series of changes, the first one being back in 2014, 2015, that implemented the new organizational structure. The second one failed, and whether you were for or against that second set of bylaw changes, the organization lost a lot of time and momentum because they had to basically go back to the drawing board and figure out how to start over again. So if this set of bylaws doesn't pass, we're looking at probably another 2, 3, 4 years before we can even go back to the drawing board. And we're kind of in a bit of an organizational limbo between being out of compliance with national, not having the advantages of the latest changes to the Colorado not-for-profit laws, and wondering what did we miss? What did we get wrong here that we couldn't get the members to support it? So that's a challenge.
And Mike, that's one of the things hopefully these will address, is that last time when this happened, and I was around in the background when the last kind of votes were happening, sometimes it's just really hard to get really good volunteer participation and understanding when people are so busy with their lives. So oftentimes, I think even last time, it's not that it didn't pass as much as just to get members, who aren't necessarily volunteers are really committed to participate to get the quorum numbers. And I think that's why this is going to be really helpful, is because the new laws do allow for this electronic voting platform, and hopefully that will really create the participation needed, and also hopefully the education to understand that most of these changes really are required changes by either the law or AIA National. So really getting that participation here is really sometimes the biggest challenge with membership organizations of all types.
And as you can see from Adam's first slides, we got bigger fish to fry. We want to move on. You have to have the rules of the game in place on the table, but we want to move on to the stuff that isn't the inside baseball that actually moves the needle on some changes in society and profession at large. Okay, Jason had a follow-up question. Speaking of member participation and engagement, kind of goes along with this point too. How many people signed up for today? So we had 35 register, and we've got 29 currently on the call. So I think your rule applies, Zach, as well. So for every person that's here today, tell 5 other people about this change and ask them to vote. Mike Riggs, another question from Michael. The language in the current bylaws specifically notes the requirement for local section allocation. The revised bylaws dilute the requirement for local section discretionary funds by stating that the budget would note expenditures, including any discretionary funds for local section activities. The previous language was revised in 2016 as a specific provision such that the board has guidelines and requirements for support of the local sections. Would anybody like to jump in on that? I've got some thoughts that I need to percolate to answer that.
Sure, I'll start with that. I think being on the task force and going through the rewording of the bylaws here, I think I'm going to respectfully disagree with the question. I think it doesn't dilute it at all. The previous bylaws had a line that says a discretionary fund for each local section will be included in the budget. The new bylaws say we have a budget and including any discretionary funds for local section activities. To me, that's essentially the same thing, and we wanted to make sure that it was still included in the bylaws, which is why it's still in there. And it's still a discretionary fund for activities. The board is the determiner of the discretionary funds, and so, but we got to get people involved. We can't throw money at things that we don't know and don't have people leading. So we've got to have that member engagement and say, hey, we want to do this, and this is what the cost is going to be, and we need money for it, and we need to know those things so that we can plan accordingly and budget accordingly.
Thanks, Zach. I think that's spot on, and one of the reasons for the way that was changed is there was a whole section on sections in the bylaws, not to be redundant. So it wasn't just a formatting issue of changing how that language appears, but that was a carryover from when there were separate organizations at the section level with boards and governing responsibilities. So rather than have a line, as you're describing it, Mike, it was a line specific to sections that dealt with the budget. We wanted to have language about the budget that included section activities and funds. I know that sounds like it's not much of a distinction without a difference, but that was some of the thinking behind how that language came out. Okay, Tim Stroh. Hey, Tim. Does the new version of the bylaws allow for board members to make updates required by national AIA in the future? It seems that type of clause would help us to stay more nimble. Kara, I know you saw this. It's toward the very end of our bylaws. We had the ability to do that before. We do have it in the future, and I think it's even more specific and called for. The answer is, in short, yes and no. The board does have the ability to do it to an extent on certain parts of the bylaws. But if it changes any rights and privileges of membership, even if it's a national change, it still has to go to the membership. Did I get that right?
Yeah, that's correct. There's basically, I'm going to say, is because the affiliation requires you to comply with National's bylaws, the board can make those changes, but the Colorado nonprofit statute requires members to approve certain changes. So of course, those are still embedded in the bylaws, those statutory requirements.
And I will say the task force and the board both discussed whether to do this in two parts. So to use the provision in the bylaws that lets the board make those sort of technical, non-substantive changes that are national related, that don't deal with rights and privileges of members, follow that process, and then sometime later come along with all the other changes. But we really thought it is a wholesale revision. So let's just put everything out there in one document for the whole world to see and ask people to vote for it.
And to add on to that, you know, we wanted to be transparent about everything that we're doing. We didn't want to pretend like we were making changes behind the scenes that we were just going to make changes to and then put things to vote. We just wanted to say, this is it, this is what we're doing, these are all the changes, and be as transparent as we could be.
And I'll say that I think there will be a bylaws change in the near future that the board will be able to act on. Mike touched on it earlier. You know, National is taking a look at the sectional structure, or the regional structure, and they're proposing to do away with the region structure and how that works with the national board. And you know, it gets complicated. But if, you know, in the bylaws currently, we have a section about representation to our regional structure. We kept that in because we currently still have regions. You know, if National does away with regions, you know, in the future, the board can just make a motion to strike that section of the bylaws, and, you know, members don't have to get involved because there's no region anymore. So there's no regional representation anymore.
Yeah, and who knows, something might happen along the way between when it got proposed and when it actually goes to the members. So we didn't want to get the cart before the horse there on putting a proposed change before it gets finalized. I want to go back to the timeline for a second, and certainly we've got time for some more questions if people want to ask it, but you can see how everything is happening in progression. So we literally go from the voting closing on November 10th to the call for nominations on November 11th. The reason why everything's happening in succession is because the terms for some of those positions are changing. We're asking for one more position for at-large director, for example. So we really do need to have this bylaws vote before we ask for the next round of volunteers to step forward. So that's, if you're wondering why things are timed the way they are, that's one specific reason. And Zach, you want to mention who's joining you on the nominating committee, just so folks know if they want to ask questions or talk to somebody about that in their section, they can do that. And the nominating committee requires someone from each section to be part of that group too. So.
Sure, I had to pull up the list, make sure I didn't forget anybody. So the way the board policy is set up is the past president chairs the nominating committee, and they are the only person on the current board that is allowed on that committee. And then we have a sectional representation from each of the sections. So from the Denver section, we have Tanya Salgado. From the North section, we have Scott Rodwin. From the South section, we have Stuart Coppage. And from the West section, we have Kyle Webb.
Thanks,
so if you have any questions about the positions, once that call goes out, I'm sure we'll be doing some informationals about, you know, what each position entails. And for the officer positions, those are outlined in the bylaws. But if you want to know how to get involved this year, reach out to your nominating committee person and say, hey, where would I be a good fit?
Thanks. We got a question that's come in from Adam Teasing of Box City fame. Hi, Adam. Will the dues, quote unquote, savings by removing the WMR go to the members for a vote to have cheaper dues? Zach, I know you'll have something to say about this because you're the incoming treasurer for the Western Mountain region. So I kind of previewed something that's way down the road as a possibility, a hypothetical situation as it relates to funding section activities without impacting the bottom line on member dues, as something that we've kicked around internally. But you know, it's going to be up to the Western Mountain region as to what the dues are, if they fully go away, if they get reduced, if they maintain as they are. But once that is removed as a governance function of national, then it becomes kind of like the voluntary sections. The membership in the region will be voluntary of each of those states, including what they pay or not pay into the dues.
Right. So I think, Adam, I think the short answer is it's too early to tell. So my understanding of what's happened to date is there was a motion put forward in 2017, 2018 to study the regions. That passed. So there was a regional task force. We had a couple of Colorado members sit on that task force to study the regions. They came up with 3 different models of how that could move forward. And the one the board, national board, has decided to move forward with is to do away with the regions. However, they're not just making the call, they're going to put it to a member vote. I believe the plan is to do that at the 2021 convention. And I don't know what the language of that is going to be yet. They haven't announced any of that yet, but that's going to go to the member delegation for a vote. And then from there, we'll see what happens. As Mike said, I'm going to be the next WMR treasurer, mainly because I wanted Colorado to have a voice in those conversations moving forward at the region level. And so the region doesn't know what its fate is yet because that vote hasn't happened. So stay tuned on that one.
Yeah, and specific to Colorado membership voting on dues, that happens in cases of an assessment, like a special assessment. If examples I've seen would be when you host a convention and you want to have an assessment on the membership at large to have a either free or greatly reduced cost of attending the convention when it comes to town. Or let's say you want to establish a Center for Architecture or have a new office that requires a build out and a long-term lease, and you don't have it in one particular year. So you might have an assessment that goes, say a per head assessment of $50 per member for 2 or 3 years. Something like that requires a membership vote. Typically though, operating dues year to year, whether they go up or down, are under the purview of the board. So those don't have to and almost never do go to the membership at large for a vote unless there's an assessment for a particular reason. Karen, Kara, sorry, does that sound about right? And we got 2 former Colorado treasurers on the call too, so they would have corrected me if I screwed that up.
I believe what it states is we are allowed, if we're going up by inflation, which is an index in economics, and we do that every year, that's standard. The board doesn't even vote on that. Whereas if we want to increase dues above that inflation index, then it's a board vote up to a certain percentage jump. And then if it gets crazy, then it has to be a member vote.
Thanks, Adam, for the question. Appreciate it. Well, 1 minute, it's the 1 minute warning, 1 minute to play. If there are any more questions or comments, we can take those. Otherwise, I want to thank everybody for your participation today, both the panelists and everybody on the call. It's been actually kind of fun to talk about bylaws and where the organization is going. So I hope that you as a participant enjoyed the conversation and got a little bit more out of it. And of course, if you have any questions or comments, we're always willing to take those in. There is that dedicated standalone website, which is part of our website, all about bylaws. So you'll find any information you'll need on there. If there's something you'd like to see more of that would be a suggestion to add to that website, we're happy to take that as well. And then I really do want to say that that email address we gave, it'll come from Associations Voting. It'll say something along the lines of announcement@associationsvoting.com. Be on the lookout for that. Every eligible voting member will get an email from that address. And that is unique to you. You can't share it. It's not a vote early, vote often situation. It's one member, one vote. And so be sure to watch for that. It may go to your spam or junk folder because it'll be a new address that you haven't seen before, but please be on the lookout for that. You'll get that on November 5th, and the voting will be open. And I will say vote early, maybe not often, but vote early. The sooner we can hit those quorum requirements, the better. So we're not waiting until the last minute and hoping that we get as many people to vote as we need to, just to make it an official vote for the record. Any closing thoughts from our group today? Zach, I'll let you go first. We'll do Zach, Kara, and Adam. How about that?
Well, first, I'd just like to reiterate what Mike just said. Please do keep an eye out for that email. Please do vote. A lot of member hours have gone into revising the bylaws and looking at things. And we didn't just hit the problem things. We went line by line. And as Mike said, there were over 1,000 revisions. And we really wanted to clean this up and streamline it and bring it, to modern day. So a lot of the task force was all members. And so we have everybody's best interest at heart. And we'd appreciate a vote of confidence on that. And secondly, after the vote happens, look for the open call for nominations. And remember, please put your name down for something, or prod 5 people to do it if you can. Thanks.
I'm not sure I have any particular closing statements on this, except for, the goal of this, of course, is to provide
Closing arguments.
Closing arguments. Vote. Participate and vote. Voting is important. If you don't vote, but again, it's really participation. It's just really good governance and AIA National's policies and procedures or governance we're putting in place here. And we just really need the participation. And if there's any questions or about anything at all, of course, anyone here in the panel would be able to be happy to answer them. You could always, confer with Mike or anyone and get in contact with me so I could answer any particular legal questions.
Thanks, Kara, for once again being a great resource to us.
Yeah, thank you, Kara. My closing thoughts. We have set AIA Colorado on a course of action, and we've had some great success and some great momentum this year with our board and with our committees and task force and volunteers and our staff. And I just want to see that continue into the future. And by cleaning up these bylaws and revising them to speak to who we are now and where we're going is important. And so I urge all of you to participate, to vote, and to tell the people that you work with to participate and vote as well. And like Zach said, this is a volunteer organization, and we can only do so much with so many people helping. The more people involved, the more people that care, the bigger change we can make, and we could push the needle in the direction that is going to make great change. So thank you for your time today, and please vote and help us approve these revisions.
Okay, couldn't have said it better myself. Thanks, Adam, Kara, and Zach for your time today, and the task force for all their work, and the board for moving us in a direction, and of course for you for giving us an organization to be so passionate about changing the world. Have a great rest of the week, and we'll see you next time.